Puppetry is an ancient art form thought to have originated about 3,000 years ago to animate and communicate the ideas and needs of human societies. Istanbul's annual International Puppet Festival is celebrating just that, so we sent TRT World's Errol Jivan to check it out.
All objects have a story to tell, but puppets have a rare ability because they were made specifically to perform. Let's ride. Puppetry can loosely be defined as any object manipulated by a human.
There is an energy that comes from within you. You have to pass that energy onto the puppet. If you can manage that, then you're doing a good job as a puppet master.
Puppets provide an essential link between learning and play, which makes them perfect teaching tools for young and the elder.
Puppetry for me is an international language of music, of purpose and of dance, and it unites the people. And of course, when we talk about the kids going to puppet theater become better, definitely.
Puppetry is a pure and unbridled form of expression, live and most often improvised.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
With friends, we discovered that the magic of the puppetry is something that took our soul, because you are playing with something that in fact is dead. It's a piece of wood, but you make it alive and make it, through it your emotion to the audience.
When the puppeteers aren't using their own voices to make the sound effects, they're using these fun old-timey cartoon tools.
I like to make puppets. I like to make something new, to make it from the very beginning. The most difficult part is to make idea alive. And when I decide how to make it, then the last part is really boring. That's just to make and to make a rehearsal. But to make an idea, to make a good idea, it's really that I like.
Part of the 20th annual Istanbul Puppet Festival is that there'll be an exhibit in Topkapı Palace where you can see an array of modern and historic Turkish puppets on display. Bye! Thanks for playing with us at the Puppet Festival.
Errol obviously had a lot of fun with that assignment. Now let's check out some of the most common puppet types that have developed over time.
Puppets have been used since the earliest times to animate and communicate. Some historians think they predate actors in theatre.
My puppets and I would like to give you our idea of a Hollywood premiere.
Made from a wide range of materials, there are many different varieties of puppets, from very simple in construction and operation to very complex ones. The simplest type is the finger puppet. A hand puppet is, you've guessed it, controlled by hand.
Stanley Thomas, for example, had a puppet which could evidently pick out any card required by its master.
A marionette is a more complicated type that is suspended and controlled by many strings. They're more sophisticated and require greater manipulative control. There's evidence they were used in Egypt as early as 2000 BC. But in Europe, Italy was commonly considered to be the birthplace of the marionette. These early puppets were used to illustrate morality plays to a largely illiterate audience. A shadow puppet is a cut-out figure held between a source of light and a translucent screen.
Aman Karagöz'üm dur, vurma. Sen de bostan korkuluğu gibi karşımda durma.
Karagöz and Hacivat are such puppets dating all the way back to the Ottoman Empire. Before the rise of radio and film, stories about these two characters were among the most popular forms of entertainment in Turkey.
Orta oyunumuzda
Improvisation is what we use the most of our shadow plays. This improvisation spirit is present in the essence of Hacivat and Karagöz.
Tonight, don't make the same clatter that you made last night. It wasn't like old chunks of arse let a bucket of water in the hall.
A ventriloquist's dummy is a human-shaped puppet operated by a ventriloquist performer. They are called dummies because they don't speak on their own. Ventriloquists produce the voice with little or no movement of their mouth, which requires a lot of practice and special skills.
There are very few ventriloquists left, right? The others have been killed, stoned to death, chased up to Canada. It's sad.
Carnival puppets are usually designed to be part of large spectacles, such as parades. They're at least the size of a human and often much larger. In this case, they require more performers to move the body and limbs, like the ones we are used to seeing in Chinese New Year parades.
Now, to talk more about this, I'm joined by some puppeteers who are in Istanbul to perform Shadows Tell Stories, which tells 3 folk stories from Indonesia. Suzanne, thanks for joining us. In this digital age, some people would say that puppetry is dead. What do you say to that?
I really don't think that's the case, to be honest. Well, the fact that there are so many festivals about puppetry, I think is a proof of the fact that this is going on. And we always have quite a big public coming to see our plays, and people like this. I think actually the fact that digital is so present these days makes people look for something different and going back to traditions. And seeing something like this that is so real and simple and direct and immediate, I think people really like it.
Now, you're traveling all over the world to tell these stories. Does puppetry have a broad audience worldwide?
Yeah, well, in our experience, yeah. We perform in Hungary last spring and many times in Spain and in Italy. And we always have quite a broad public. And the nice thing is that we've got kids as well as adults, and they both really like the stories. I think it's very, very easy to enjoy stories told by puppets and with the skills of the boys and just making it alive.
Clementina, speaking of contemporary puppetry, what's been the biggest change in puppetry over the years?
Over the years? Mm-hmm. The most recent ones probably is precisely what you were mentioning at the beginning, which is the introduction of more digital elements into the plays. Maybe that's the newest one. But of course, puppetry has changed all over the centuries. And I think precisely trying to introduce new elements is been the change. Like shadow puppets at the beginning were produced with fire. For sure, when a bulb was created, it made a huge difference. And of course, now that we have so many options with lighting, like shadow puppetry has many, many more options that it didn't have before, such as colors, such as effects. So maybe in digital area, if you know how to really use it, it's a good element that can enhance what you're doing, or especially at least in what we do, which is shadow puppet.
And so what are the fundamental similarities and differences between puppetry traditions around the world?
Puppetry tradition is different, and something I really think is a difference and something to notice is, for example, especially in Asia, puppetry is a big art, main art. Even if it's not dead puppetry in the West, it's true that it's been considered a minor art sometimes compared to theater, opera. And that's not the case in Asia. Asia is really valuing what is behind puppetry.
So do you get different reactions when you're in Asia as opposed to other parts of the world?
Not really when we are, but in general, when you go to Asia and you see puppeteers there, people recognize them. They are like pop stars there. They are really important people. The art is valued, and people all ages go and see the shows. In Western tradition, it's more children who usually nowadays go to puppet shows, even if there are puppet shows for adults. But that would be another difference that at the present is happening.
So now you're in Istanbul to tell Shadows Tell Stories. How did you come across these stories?
We were living in Indonesia for a good while, and we were listening to stories. We were also reading stories, and folk stories mainly. And we were just listening to many of them and just thinking of how would they look on a show. And that's how we came across them, basically. And then we transferred them into puppet shows.
And so, Susanna, you tell a story. Tell me about what your story is in Shadows Tell Stories.
Well, we tell 3 different stories. The first one is about a gecko who cannot sleep and goes to the king of the jungle, who is the elephant, to tell him to do something because the fireflies are blinking their lights and they don't let him sleep. And we tell this story in front of the screen, actually, and Clementina is making shadows made of light, actually. So she's actually projecting the light of the different animals. The second story is a story from Indonesia, from Bali, with these characters, actually. This is the King Cengkar and Aji Saka, the hero of the story, who basically goes to speak to the king because the king took up the very bad habit of eating human meat. And so he goes and saves basically the whole city. And then the last one is a story from the island of Papua in Indonesia, of course, and it's about how many years ago the days used to be very, very short, and so 2 little sisters tried to convince the sun to stay a bit longer so that they have more time, basically.
Fascinating.
So the choice of our stories, it's also to show diversity in Indonesia, because Indonesia is an archipelago, so there are many islands there, and there's diversity there, so we try to choose a story from each of the islands. So we read many stories, but one of our choice was, let's try to pick up stories from different islands and also that show different kind of approaches, animals, kings and bad people, and also just normal people in the third story. So there's kind of diversity in the islands and also
to show it's not a homogeneous culture, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.